not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. This is Friday Java on the 8th of June, 2018, from WBRNRadio and on the Boston Red Network. We have our friends from the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, and we always remember Herbert Heyer, who was murdered, brutally murdered in the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia, by members of the alt-right, white supremacist, LOT gangs, and those gangs are still operating out of the White House. This sets the tide of things that are going on across these continuous 50 states. We'll start out with the crystal ball, and we'll move from the crystal ball to climate, the reappearance of Dust Bowl conditions in May across the U.S. But firstly, we'll go to Virginia. It's kind of an interesting situation here, and we'll talk some about polling. We normally talk in a more extensive format on the week that was, but we'll do it here. Incidentally, we've had a number of programs during the week, the 50th-year anniversary of the murder of Robert Kennedy in Los Angeles, California. It's 50 years, 1968, and of course we're in now 2018. So we have a 50-year anniversary there. We had the primaries in various states, including California. We'll make some remarks here about the generic ballot and where it stands. But nonetheless, here the key points. This is by Godfrey Skelly, the associate editor of the Crystal Ball, on the 17th of June, with 9 contested House primaries and 1 Senate primary. This will be on June the 12th. Will be an interesting. Will be the busiest federal primary day in Virginia's modern history, surpassing the 7 total contest held in 2012. In the Senate primary, Prince Henry County Supervisor Corey Stewart, Republican, appears to be the ostensible favorite, largely due to his unexpected strong performance in last year's GOP gubernatorial primary, where he finished a close second to Ed Gillespie. However, there has been a little polling, and it's possible that since the state delegate Nick Fracas could surprise Stewart. Well, we don't know about that. But 6 Democrats are running for the right to face Barbara Comstock. You remember Barbara Comstock's been a character around from the Clinton days. That would be in Virginia 10, one of the most endangered Republican House incumbents in the country. For the Democrats seem to have at least some chance of winning the nomination. To Comstock, a prodigious fundraiser, and has a history of outpacing the partisan lean of the district she represents. But the district's Democratic shift in 2016 and 17 shows why she is one of the most formidable targets in 2018. One of the things that's happened in Virginia after the Women's March, and people try to downgrade the Women's March, we'll have LaDonna as part of our introduction to Friday Jobber every week. But it has historical significance, and it has present-day political significance, and all these women running from Virginia to New Mexico and points in between that cannot be denied. What effect also of the later Me Too movement, and Bill Clinton out pitching his book with James Peterson, I believe it is, the novelist, nonetheless talking about the Monica Lewinsky affair, which was a shoddy affair, was best described by the national leader at the time, but his description at the time, Dr. Al Sharpton, talking about Clinton and the socioeconomic conditions in Arkansas. I won't go any further on that one. But nonetheless, that affair was a shabby affair. His comments basically saying he would not done it any differently was disrespectful to women in general. And this is one of the big problems, not in Wild Bill did it intentionally. It's a leftover condition that men, baby boomers, our age, that many of these people didn't see any harm in the behavior, particularly towards subordinate. Now, his was a little bit different, that they were actually, he and Monica Lewinsky were in a relationship. Granted, she was a young intern at the time, but she had big plans, and of course I guess you could ask Hillary DeMonster Clinton about that. But nonetheless, these are things that have occurred over the years. It's just her affair became poignant because of a civil rights lawsuit filed by one Paula Jones, and being one that had experience with many civil rights lawsuits, it was interesting how that particular suit got to the status that it was. Usually those types of suits would get just dismissed at the district court level. But that suit continued on and created problems for Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton perjured himself, there was no doubt about that. But the condition of perjury is a little bit different, and most people don't understand this. In state courts and in federal courts, in the civil division, very, very difficult to get a person for perjury, and even in the criminal division. Now, such charges as, say, lying to the FBI is a different kind of situation. But we're talking about a testimony there. One of the prime examples stood out in a criminal proceeding was the trial of the century, the People versus Orenthal, James Simpson, the national hero, O.J. Simpson, that marked the racist dog. Furman was set there. F. Lee Bailey, an outstanding criminal attorney, pulled the string, and a racist dog was charged with perjury. But that perjury conviction of a racist dog didn't put a dent in his armor, so to speak. He became not a published writer of mysteries, we'll call it. He wrote about the Shurkin case up in New Hampshire. Anyway, and he was part of the Kennedy family, the son of Ethel Kennedy's brother. Anyway, and that points, of course, back to that particular era, that he was ultimately ordered a new trial in that particular situation. But that just exemplifies the perjury angle. Now, this whole big debate here is, can a president, a sitting president, be compelled to testify? Yes, he can. Bill Clinton is a point there, and DJ Trump playing up his circus. But that in itself is a circus. It's an idea. If you get in the newspaper, whether it be positive or negative news, you're still there. Now, that is sort of like akin to an attack ad. We don't want to get too far off here. But you can, as LBJ would say, go to the proverbial well too many times. And you lessen the impact of it. And this is DJ Trump continuing on TV. The other day he was on there with a Marine Corps course. This whole idea of hitting the National Football League, players in the National Football League, I should say, that kneeled as a protest. But it just so happens that the majority of these players and the majority of the National Football League are African Americans, and that plays to his base. But you can play up the base too many times, and this is where the connection in Virginia is set up. And that in itself is a very interesting situation, how this will play out. We'll get into it a little bit more with the generic ballots. Let me continue on here with Barbara Comstock, because she ties back into the Clinton affair. Nonetheless, the Crystal Balls, a home district, Virginia 5, turned into messy in late May when incumbent Tom Garrett announced that he would not seek re-election despite having nearly won renomination. With Garrett's withdrawal, the Virginia 5 District Committee picked a distillery owner there, Denver Regimen, to take on a journalist and filmmaker named Leslie Cockburn. The busiest federal primary day in modern history. A year ago, Virginia had one of the liveliest, no doubt about that, primary in history, with contested a statewide gubernatorial race. Well, that was put to rest there. The one Senate race they have is Tom Keene. Tom Keene was the vice presidential nominee running along with Hillary the Monster Clinton. And he was a protege, instrumental, excuse me, in the management of the 2008 campaign of Barack Obama. So this is sort of where that goes back there. And Virginia holds a more contested more contested primaries for U.S. House in 2018 than any post. This is World War II, and this is kind of the Great Patriotic War cycle, surpassing the 6 in 2012. Well, Virginia is a big state, and it's a changing state, no doubt about that. Period. Let me move on here. Other Republican primaries around the country. Virginia's primary for Senate features candidate racing to show the most support for DJ Trump in Prince William County, the Board of Supervisors there. This is Corey Stewart and Nick Fratis. And Minister, this is this perennial joker, named E.W. Jackson, who backs the president. Well, Jackson has been backing the president. Jackson's rival stood in the earnestness of his stated support for the president, including an ad where Jackson says, unlike Tom Keene, I'll be the senator who stands with DJ Trump instead of against him. No, well, Fratis, less vocal Trump backer, the review of Fratis' social media and media appearances suggests that he does back DJ Trump. He didn't want to be too loud with it. Fratis has drawn endorsements from more libertarian-minded small government Republicans, such as Rand Paul. Must be an interesting setup there with these characters. Despite some stylistic differences, the three candidates are conservatives on the most hotbed conservatives on most hot button issues. Stewart sums up his campaign in a tweet. Vote June 12th to defeat radical leftist Tom Keene. Tom Keene is not a radical leftist. Defund Planned Parenthood, and so forth and so on here. The delegation defends the Second Amendment, castigates the abortion industry and the welfare state as a cause of declining social cohesion, and blames the Democrats for Japanese American internments in the Second World War, resistance to women's suffrage, and racial segregation. Oh, this is okay. This Jackson has a history of controversial statements, ranging from saying that gays and lesbians are very sick people to comparing yoga to Satan. Jackson's crazy, but anyway, that's there. Another nutcase, but they have these nutcases in there. Now, as far as the Japanese internment, yes, the Japanese were interned under the Roosevelt administration. It was a unfortunate situation confined to the West Coast in California and in Washington State, and many Japanese Americans fought in the Great War against the Imperial Japanese. And one of the connections here, you still have remnants of those characters, these fascist Japanese types, running around Tokyo. And the Japanese capitalists, you have to understand, the emperor, the Japanese capitalists, just like the capitalists in Germany, endorsed, went along with Schicklgruber and his government. And the reason for that is, if you look at these fascist parties, right-wing parties, they're all pro-business. Just as the right-wing government we have in this country. And getting a little bit off here, we'll get this on the week, but was in Toronto, Canada, some right-wingers, the brother of the late crackhead Ford, is evidently his progressive, imagine a progressive conservative party, he calls it, has won election on divided left ticket in Toronto. That is an area where 35% of the Canadian people live. So we'll have more on that, and on Ford. Ford had been a right-winger, just as crackhead Ford was the mayor of Toronto, and of course he was recorded smoking crack, a troubled man that finally passed away. Anyway, nonetheless, back to Virginia here. I don't want to deviate too much. Tom Keene is there, and these various other characters running against him. The Federal Election Commission campaign fund data do provide at least some additional evidence. Stewart is probably the front runner. This is one of the ways that political scientists usually look at these characters in terms of how much money they can get. Conventional wisdom is peg Stewart as the favorite. Considering Stewart's in 2017 near miss, it's worth examining where Stewart's geographical strengths are and examining some Frecus's and Jackson's might find support. And this is a map here comparing Stewart's, let's see, precinct level to his share of 42.5% statewide. And we won't get too much into this because this is more of a Virginia story here. But if we look at it with Stewart, Northern Virginia, 48% there. Hampton Roads, 25%. This is for Stewart. 26% to Capital Region, and the rest of Virginia, 55%, as opposed to Gillespie. Now, he was at 49. This is in Northern Virginia, 25, and we Hampton Road at 32 and 48. Now, the regional share. Now, this is the share of the total pie there. Northern Virginia is 30%. Hampton Road is 20%. 18% the Capital Region, and 31% the rest of Virginia. So Stewart's connection to the outer northern Virginia suburbs enabled him to win his home county, while also running close in Gillespie in Lauderham County, etc. here. But Gillespie had been around, so it was a well-known person. If Gillespie is a favorite to win, a major question may be the margin in the Senate race, which could matter a great deal. Well, no doubt about that. Should Kane win by 10 percentage points? This is what Rep. Northam did in 2017. It that might make it difficult for someone like Comstock to survive in a Democratic district. Well, the enthusiasm is there in Virginia. They just have to bring it back for the primary here, and if it turns out into a what we call a traditional turnout election, he will win by 10 points or more. 6 Democrats are running. This is in the Barbara Comstock district here. And now let's see, what do we have here? Well, they're basing this on money. This is Jennifer Waxton is ahead on the money count. So I don't know. 4 Democrats raised at least $300,000. Will at least $300,000 cash on hand. Are also the 4 who seem like the ones winning in the 6-person race. So difficult to say there. I won't spend a lot of time on this particular situation here, handicapping this. Now, Virginia 1, Democrats have a freeway primary there to decide who will face Representative Whitman in November. Won't go too much into those because the candidates are kind of obscure. This is what happens. We understand this is a home race assessment for the people of Charlottesville, the state of Virginia. A little bit different there, period. Let's see, Virginia 2, Virginia 7 is the other chance of party flipping that is holding the primary on June the 12th. The GOP did not request to use the primary representative Brett. This Brett character is a guy that ousted Eric Canta in 2014. Already has been renominated prior to it. His opposition in November will be either a former CIA type, Abigail Spansberger, or let's see, a Marine veteran named Dan Ward. That would be kind of an interesting contest there. And the eventual winner will give Brett a challenge. Virginia 7 is a district that Trump carried by 6.5 there. Probably more than that. Still, Northam cut that margin to 3.6, making the 7 somewhat of a second-tier target for Democrats. Well, it'll be interesting there to see what they can do, particularly with the types of candidates they're running. Postscript on Virginia 5. This is Tom Garrett. Well, sizable number of candidates look at the Republican replacement race, including they see Bill Stanley. I'm not sure who Bill Stanley is here in that district. Let me just sum all this up. But in the end, the committee voted on the floor ballot to nominate this Denver Regsman instead of Dunbar, Regsman, who ran a short-lived gubernatorial campaign in 2017. Well, it will be a little bit difficult to figure out where these folk are going here. Let's look at the some current polling here, we hope. And a generic ballot, which we normally don't do. We'll do this because of Virginia, and there's a little information there. But we don't, this is June, we don't regard this generic ballot information as out there. This is from the Fox News people. They have DJ Trump at 45%. And the generic ballot, they have the Democrats ahead by 9%. Or 9 points, I should say. This is on today. On Thursday, we have NBC News, the approval rating at 44% for DJ Trump. And we have generic ballot for them is Democrats by 10. And on Wednesday, we had a slew of polls here. But the IBD, that's the Independent Business Daily, their poll is pretty accurate. They have DJ Trump at 36%. And the Quinnipiac poll has him at 40% out on the same day. Reuters at 40% also. And for the Quinnipiac people, the Democrats are up by 7. That's in the generic poll there. Rasmussen only 4, and the Economist YouGov poll has the Democrats up by 6. And the BID poll has the Democrats up by 7. So depending on where you want to go with this, Reuters has the Democrats up by 11. It appears after the California, have to see when these are, let's look to the business one. But the Democrats are up by a little more. That got to be pretty slim in the margin of error. Loses ground with men, gains with women, gets high marks. This is the business Investors Business Daily on handling of the Democratic Republic of North Korea situation. Is polling dropped to 36%, while support for handling of the economy increased, and most approve of of North Korea. Somebody's biggest drop in approval rating amongst men when it fell to 39 in June from 49 in May. His support among European men fell to 47 from 56%. However, he gained with women, who among whom support climbed to 34 from 29. It's kind of unusual there. He also lost support among independents. Now, this is very important here. It went from 34 last month to 29. Excuse me. His net favorables have remained unchanged, negative at 37 favorable, 54 unfavorable. Excuse me. A number of factors are driving the president's low overall ratings, said Raghaven, Monsieur, the president of Technomatic Marketing Intelligence, which conducted the poll. Fear of a trade war, higher gas prices, a media that continues to feed the public with sensational. We talked about this at the beginning of our broadcast. And misleading news stories, all contributing to, in addition, opposition to government's crackdown on illegal immigrants. This poll now was conducted from the 29th of June to June 5th. So it would not have included the latest shenanigans in California. 7-point lead over Republicans in generic ballot. Democrats lead in the IBD measurement is higher than the current average. This is from Real Clear Politics. But again, that average, and it can be criticized in that you have the Rasmussen people who are clearly an outliner there, and they figure into this particular situation. Now, the poll found that 48% give Trump high marks for his handling of the economy. That's up from 42%. The optimism index, this is from IBD, ticked up to 53.9. This marks the 21st consecutive month this index has been in positive territory. Anything above 50, as many of these indexes are, is let's see. The longest stretch of the index has been above 50 since IBD started tracking 17 years ago. And 44% approve how he's handling the threat of terrorism. You don't hear very much about that. 52% public approval of handling of the situation with North Korea, including 54% of independents. The poll found that 51% say they are not confident that the U.S. will be able to negotiate an end to the nuclear program. So this is kind of interesting here. Their poll is a little bit different. 47% say they're satisfied with the direction of the country, compared with 52%. That's been up and down. 16% said the country is currently in a recession, down from 20%. There's no evidence of that. Anyway, 56% said the economy is improving. That's from 54%. And the IBD Financial Stress Index edged up 51.1% after hitting an all-time low in May. Share of job-sensitive households, those are one or more members who are unemployed or worried about getting laid off, climbed to 25%, something we look at from 23% there. And for those following the FBI stories, it was not politically motivated, 54%, 78% of the Republicans. Methodology of the poll was conducted up to June the 5th. including responses from 905 people. It's a fairly sound poll. Let us move on here. I'm getting a little bit behind. Red Shindigs, we don't want to forget him. He was a Hall of Fame player, manager of the St. Louis Cardinals, died at 95. Spent decades in uniform as a player, coach, and manager with the Cardinals, the oldest living member of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Died on the 6th of June near St. Louis. He was 95 years old. The Cardinals announced his death at a game against the Miami Marlins, the Marlins. Excuse me. He overcame a severe eye injury and tuberculosis to have a stellar 19-year career as a switch-hitting second baseman. Helped the Cards win the 1946 World Series, and then a key contribution to Milwaukee's during the World Series in 1957. As a manager, he led the Cards for 12 years, 1960 to the 70s, guiding the team to 2 National League pennants and the 1967 World Series title, along with his famous teammate Stan the Man Musial, who came to embody the spirit of St. Louis. Musial, a Hall of Fame outfielder, died in 2013. They were often called the greatest Cardinals of all. And it goes on to a story. We won't lament on that, how he got a ride on a milk truck and it changed everything, period. But as second baseman, along with, of course, the legendary Jackie Robinson and Bobby Doerr of the Red Sox, Red Shindig was considered one of the top second basemen of his time. He was named to all-star teams and a dramatic 14th inning home run to win the 50 all-star game for the National League. He was traded to the Giants in 56, quickly established himself as a quiet leader on a powerful team, but included a slugger, Hank Aaron, and Eddie Matthews, the pitcher Warren Spahn. This was in Milwaukee. This is before what was known as the Milwaukee Braves at the time moved to Atlanta. The Braves beat the Yankees in Milwaukee in the 1957 World Series. Then won the National League pennant again the next year, only to lose the series to the damn Yankees, as he called it. He rejoined the Cards in 61, and utility infielder pinch hitter retired in 63, finishing with 2,449 hits, a lifetime average of 289. And he was named manager of the Cards in 65 with a team led by Hall of Famers, none other than the pitcher Bob Gibson, the stealing champ Lou Brock, who brought about free agency. The Cards defeated the Boston Red Sox in the 1967 series. That would be 51 years ago. In 1989, Rich Shindig was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. He said, "I never thought a milk truck ride would eventually lead to Cooperstown and the highest there." He was born in Germantown, Illinois. That is 40 miles outside of St. Louis, downstate Illinois, as we call it. Let me see here. Pointer got ahead of us a little bit there, and we'll get down here. Anyway, in Germantown, and that's outside of St. Louis, across the 1923. So his father was a coal miner, some coal mining down there, and he umpired local baseball games. Got his nickname, of course, from his red hair. And that was down in southern Illinois. Anyway, Red Shindig, remember him. Let's move on here to do the sports. Look at the time again. Well, we're not in too bad a shape here. We'll do the sports and return. The Capitals have won the Stanley Cup 4-3 over the Golden Knights of Las Vegas. A big story there. And we have on later today, the Warriors will be in Cleveland, Ohio to see what can happen here with the series as it is now 3-0. The Cavaliers, Mr. James and company, will hope to come out. Let's see, the line score is the over-under is 215.5. I believe the line score is let me see, make sure we get the old line score here up here. I don't know if you do too. Okay. Golden State by 5. Really difficult to beat that line. I think you probably have to deal with the over-under. We'll see. Good possibility there that Mr. James can pull it off. Who knows? And as they say, keep the series going. But this is Game 4, 3-0. Well, I could go to Game 5. They usually like to get at least a Game 5 out of this for the TV revenue, etc. But 3-1 to be shut out would be very unusual. But as many has said, they're just up against too many guns. Let me just finish this up here. This is Major League Baseball. The Rockies were in Cincy, Reds 7-5. The Dodgers were in Pittsburgh. Dodgers pulled that one off 8-7. They had 13 hits and 1 error, the line score. And the Pirates had 9 hits and no errors and lost the game. Anyway, the White Sox and Twins in Minnesota. Twins 7-2. That was all Twins, evidently. The Mariners and Cardinals in St. Louis. Well, the Cardinals, I suppose, were honoring Red Shandich. 4-1 was the score. Cards over the Marlins. Cards had 11 hits, no errors, and the Marlins just 4 hits there. And the Phillies and Cubbies in Wrigley Field. It was all Cubbies. The Phillies haven't had too much production. They had a little more production here than what they normally have. 4-3 was the score. And let's see, what else do we got going here? The Tigers and Red Sox. It was all Tigers 7-2 in Fenway Park. And in 10, the Orioles and Blue Jays in Toronto. 5-4 Blue Jays over the Orioles. The Mariners and Rays in Florida, a long ways from Seattle. 5-4 was the final score. The Astros Rangers battle for Texas in Dallas. Astros 5-2. And finally, the Royals and Athletics game we tuned into. The Athletics pulled us out 4-1. They had 9 hits, no errors, and Kansas City 4 hits and no errors there. So that was in Major League Baseball. Let's get the dust story here. Where is it? The U.S. has just had its warmest May in history, blowing past the 1934 Dust Bowl record. For every tract of land in the continuous U.S. that was warmer than normal in May, helping to beat a Dust Bowl era record. The average temperature of 65.4 swept the previous high mark of 64.7 set in 1934. Temperatures were more than 5 degrees above normal. That's according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The 34 record was impressive, enduring for decades, even as the climate had warmed because of increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. One of the major regions, 19 34 was so hot was because it was so dry, posting least precipitation for a month on record. A combination of drought and farming practices that left the fields bare of vegetation in 1934, resulting in the elimination of 35 million acres of formerly cultivated land that rendered useless for farming. The harsh conditions were so severe on May 11th, a massive dust storm 2 miles high traveled 2,000 miles to the east coast, blotting out monuments such as the Statue of Liberty and the U.S. Capitol. In May of 2018, temperatures soared above every even out as much help from the dry soil. Precipitation was a hair above the national average. Maryland was hit by major floods in Frederick and Ellicott City. Had its wettest May, as did Florida and Asheville in North Carolina. Parts of the country, including the south central U.S., New England, and Pacific Northwest, were drier than normal, but overall percentage of the nation affected by the drought fell more than 2% during the month. Interesting. So this is a very, very hot situation. 8 states had their warmest May on record: Virginia, Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Ohio, and Oklahoma. Across the nation, more than 8,500 warm temperature records were set. On May the 28th, Minneapolis notched its earliest 100-degree temperature. Oh boy. They usually don't have 100-degree temperatures, only 4 or 5 90 plus temperatures a year. So it was a very, very hot season, no doubt about that, as it just basically did everyone in. Let's see what else have we got. We've taken care of him. And we'll have to miss that one. So this will do it for Friday Jobber here on the Boston Red Network and WBRN Radio. We have coming up this weekend, the week that was, on Saturday morning. And Numbers Man, that's our financial program. We drive through the world of macroeconomics, government action. In other words, plenty of that. We'll have the G7 out of Toronto, Canada to report on. And it will be over, and of course, starting next week on the 12th, the summit from Singapore between His Excellency Mr. of the Democratic Republic of Korea and DJ Trump, the President of the U.S. In the realm of foreign policy, how this will affect the election. Well, very difficult to say because, again, it's in June. One of the things, if you're handicapped in this, and we'll probably hear from more handicappers tomorrow night, Mr. Cook and some others. But it's very, very difficult this early in the year, and it is early in the year. We're looking at, say, August primaries, a little different kind of situation there. We'll have some August primaries coming up, shootouts in places like Minnesota, where people are running for governor and also running for attorney general. So those are some crowded fields. Our own Keith Ellison is running statewide. He's, of course, a congressman out of the Twin Cities area. Can he run a statewide election and be successful? There's no polling out there now, but we're a little bit doubtful at this point in time. It's hard to handicap a contest when we don't know who the final people will be. First, Mr. Ellison will have to make it through the primary election and into November. And we have the present state's attorney there, Swanson, running for governor. Now, that's a very crowded race on the Democratic side of the ticket. Tim Hupalente will be running on the Republican side, but we have various people running on the Democratic side, very attuned to what's happening in Virginia. You don't have the congressional races there, but I think they have, what, 1, 2, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3 now, because Ellison won't be in his district in the Twin Cities there. They have one in southern Minnesota, a guy named Waltz. He's running for governor. And they also have in northern Minnesota, up there, Minnesota 8th, I believe, Nolan. Now, Nolan is running for lieutenant governor along with Swanson. So a lot of intrigue going on there. A lot of money will be coming into these races. So stay tuned. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the week that was. And we're also getting together an open source report. We had one last week talking about the developer site GitHub and its acquisition by Microsoft. There's more comments out there about that. Again, back to a situation, where do open source developers go? Some had been moving away from that platform, and will more people move away? We'll talk about that, and I don't know what we'll have for Sunday programming or not, but we do ask that you look at Robert Kennedy 50 years later, that historic situation there. And we also covered the primary in California. We like to do West Coast coverage. We occasionally cover California. We did quite a bit of coverage in Seattle during the mayoral race out there in Seattle. So we do try to get around the 50 continuous states, and more homes incidentally have been lost in Hawaii. We'll have that tomorrow night, volcanic activity there in Hawaii.